I've only lived in Montana since 1990, and I'm from Michigan. I was raised on an extremely diverse small farm. There we raised everything from beef cattle to rabbits to a vegetable stand to all the feed that the animals needed on the operation. And I was crazy about the cattle, crazy. And they could not talk me into doing anything other than that. And so I went into the cattle industry and was blessed to get to travel to 48 states in the southern province of Canada. But it was a little bit of a curse, too, because this happened over a 50-year period of time. So I've seen all of these dramatic changes in agriculture. But it kind of gave me the opportunity to see the world in different eyes. I was trained to be a cattle evaluator and could tell the difference between one bull in New York and a bull in Columbus, Montana, and if there was a quarter-inch difference in height, and if there was any difference in width, and the difference in weights between those bulls, and over a 30-day stretch, so that when I got my bull into Louisville, that I would know if we were going to beat the competition or not. But I was really trained to look at details. And so when I joined AERO, and they were looking for a volunteer for the Expo, I thought, maybe I better do that. Because I really do think we need to lead, and every single person needs to do something to help us with this cause. And so I thought, well, maybe I could use my skills of evaluating to help them find a speaker and some panelists for today, especially in the ag realm, since I'm such a ag nut. And so I started on this little path and thought, well, what kind of problems needs addressed? Well, so I thought of carbon. Like, we need to get carbon in the soil. I'm like, wow, I should call Rattan Law and get him to speak to us because he is the carbon rock star. And I thought, well, but wait a minute, we need to know more about the soil life, too, not just the carbon. We need to know how that's tied together. We need Elaine Ingham from the Soil Food Web, whom I was trained under and certified under, and she is like the rock star of the world when it comes to the Soil Food Web. But I thought, oh, well, wait a minute. We've got everyday people in the crowd. We've got consumers. We've got house owners that only have a little bit of lawn. And everybody needs to be in this game to solve this problem. These problems, right? We got huge problems. And then I thought about my youth back when my dad would take us on a Sunday drive every Sunday. And we'd end up at the same ice cream shop every Sunday. But we took a different route every single time, going and coming to this ice cream shop. And as I got older and wiser, I figured out that was his internet. Because he went to see what the neighbors were doing with their corn or with their then called our clover or our alfalfa for our plow down. We didn't know that it was called a cover crop back then. We just knew we better do it if we were going to raise corn the next year. So he did that every single Sunday. And it was his way of knowing what was going on in the country and who was doing what and how it was being done. And so I thought, well, we need a person to speak to us today that farmers could relate to. And believe me, you already know how conservative we are, right? But when I was a kid, I found out how quick agriculture can change. And it was more than people like my dad running around the country seeing what other people were doing when hybrid corn seed come into the country. Do you know how many years it took those conservative farmers to change to hybrid seed corn? Any guesses? 5 years. That was it. Fast changeover, right? So we need somebody to speak to us that can get their hands dirty. We need somebody that can stand up, right? And not be afraid of doing something different. And not be willing to make mistakes. I've learned so much more from making mistakes than any of the victories or any of the champion bulls that I've shown, any of that stuff. the knowledge came from the mistakes. So the only one person in the nation that I could think of that had the experience, that experience turned into knowledge. That knowledge now has been ripened by wisdom. And that man is Gabe Brown. And here he is today. So please welcome him to the stage. And he is going to help us figure out ways to become regenerative, because there's nothing to sustain until we can figure that out. So Gabe, thank you for saying yes, and take her away.
I absolutely enjoy coming to the state of Montana because it really resembles the climate and the topography, at least in eastern Montana, of where I'm at in central North Dakota. This is a picture of my ranch. Our ranch is located directly on the eastern edge of Bismarck. In fact, the majority of our ranch is now in city jurisdiction. So that picture there was taken in city jurisdiction, the city of Bismarck, which creates its own unique challenges. The city of Bismarck is the third fastest growing metropolitan city under 100,000 people in the United States. Within 1 mile of this photo, there's over 300 houses. As a matter of fact, pretty close to within a half a mile of where that photo was taken. So that's kind of some of the things I'm up against. So what do I have in common? What does a rancher from North Dakota have in common with producers out here in Montana? Well, the answer is simple. It's soil. No matter where I go, and I have the good fortune of, I spend about 6 months every winter traveling throughout North America and abroad talking about soil health. And one of the things I tell people wherever I'm at is I am 100% positive that the principles I'm going to share with you today can occur on your operation, because they're simply the principles of nature. And those are constant no matter where we are in the world. And I've seen those principles be applied all over the world. Everywhere where there's production agriculture, we can use the principles of nature. So today we are challenged to feed an ever-growing population. And they used to say, well, we have to feed 9 billion people by the year 2050. Now there's some people saying, oh, it's going to be 10 billion people by the year 2050. And the current production model is based on that. Hey, we got to produce more. You can't open a farm publication or hear anything on the farm news about more. We got to produce, whether it be yields or pounds. So I'm going to take a few minutes this morning to go back and show you exactly what that mantra has gotten us. The current production model is one based on monocultures. And not so much here in western Montana, but you travel throughout, just starting in North Dakota, all the way through the Corn Belt, go south all the way to Texas, and what do you see? Field after field, monoculture corn, monoculture soybeans. When you get into western states, monoculture wheat. Get up north a little bit, monoculture canola. I don't care if you're talking cotton. Wherever I'm at, I just was in Hawaii last week, monoculture pineapple, monoculture. These practices, though, have caused a loss in diversity. Nobody can argue these points I'm going to share with you, so just bear with me. This is a photo of one of my, what I call native pastures. Now, Ellen Savory will chastise me for using the word native. We shouldn't call it native, but I'm going to refer to it as that because, to our knowledge, it has never been touched. My son taught range management at the local community college for 5 years, and he brought his students out to this paddock. And in a 2-hour time frame, they counted over 140 different species of grasses, forbs, and legumes. That's a tremendous amount of diversity. Yet here we are in production agriculture today, only producing monocultures. So we went from 140 species down to 1. This loss of diversity, then, has led to a destruction in what? The answer is our soil. I really like this photo here. This photo was from a farm where they took a forested area. They cleared part of that forested area, tilled it, monoculture soybeans for 17 years. That's the same soil, 17 years later. I so wish when I started down this path I would have archived my soils, because the soils on my ranch on the cropland fields were just like what we see on the right there. It's easy to look at that photo and see which of those soils is going to be able to infiltrate more water, which is going to hold more water, which has more life in it, which is going to be able to provide the nutrients for any growing plant, thus supplying the nutrients for us. It's pretty easy to see. Yet wherever I travel all over the world, I'm seeing this same scenario. If we look under a microscope, it becomes even more apparent from an water infiltration standpoint which soil is going to infiltrate more water. That lack of biodiversity also leads to lower nutrient cycling. If you have lower nutrient cycling, what are you going to do? You're going to increase fertilizer use. Conventional farmers are going to use more synthetics. Organic farmers are going to use more organic additives. With this increased synthetic fertilizer use, that's going to spur a decline in what? Mycorrhizal fungi. And I wish I could have made it here yesterday in time for the presentation on mycorrhizal fungi, because I really find that of interest. I think one of the most underappreciated things those of us who are producers have in agriculture is mycorrhizal fungi. We don't understand it enough, and it plays an extremely important role. Synthetic fertilizer also causes a spur in the decline of biology. And all soil health and all nutrients we obtain need to come about as a result of biology. High synthetic fertilizer use also increases the propagation of what? Weeds. Weeds are high nitrogen users. You use more synthetic nitrogen in particular, you're going to have an increase in weeds, plain and simple. Increased number of weeds then causes an increased use in herbicides, right? The more weeds producers have, if you're not organic, you're going to use herbicide. If you are organic, you're going to till more. Now, many of those herbicides are chelators. To chelate means to bind to metals, okay? So metals such as zinc, manganese, copper, iron, they're all bound then by these herbicides. And if they are, plants aren't going to be able to uptake them and use them. What happens then? If a plant doesn't have the micronutrients available to it, it's going to start developing diseases, especially fungal diseases. Isn't it amazing, since we've seen a real spike the past 15 plus years in the amount of herbicide being sprayed on our cropland fields, we're also seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of fungicides being applied to our growing crops. These fungicides then are detrimental to what? Soil biology, plain and simple. So we're trying to put a Band-Aid on one foot and really shooting ourselves in the other, aren't we? Because then plants are not healthy enough to ward off pests, we spray pesticides. Because we spray pesticides, we have what? Decline in the pollinators. And you can't pick up any farm publication today without reading about the plight of the pollinators. Those are the same pollinators we need in production agriculture to pollinate our crops, right? You see this vicious cycle that the current production model has taken us on? These pesticides we spray also cause a decline in the amount of our predator insects, the same predators that would take care of the very pest we're trying to kill. Makes no sense. My question then is, what effect does this have on our resources? Take a look at this photo. Whoops. What have we learned? I'll go back here. What have we learned in the past 79 years? The upper left, that's Colorado, January 12th of 2014. There's April 14th of 1935 during the Dust Bowl. Have we really progressed in our production model? I don't think so. Look at that. That was just a photo just taken this past year. Here's a photo I had of my son took of me standing in the ditch of my neighbor's fields. That's a no-till operation there of my neighbor's. We had a windstorm, 2+ days of sustained 60-mile-an-hour winds. Took his topsoil. I'm pointing to the top wire on a barbed wire fence. Completely covered with soil. Just so happens he had seeded spring wheat 2 days prior to that. That's his seed on the soil surface. He lost the entire topsoil. Now, think of it this way. If you have a sheet of paper, the width of that, the thickness of that sheet of paper is equivalent to 1 ton of topsoil. How many tons of topsoil did he lose taking all that soil above where that wheat was seeded? Think about that. Now, I feel very fortunate in that it was an east wind and I live west of him. But what happens to all that topsoil then? This photo was taken out of an airplane, and I see this as I fly. I take a lot of photos out of airplanes. You see that? That's a river on the eastern coast. Does that look healthy enough? They got that, as Ray calls it, a nice little diaper around the outside. They got green planted, and they think they're protecting our watersheds. In Montana, I know this is an issue also. What's with that? All the applied nutrients, right? Not all of it, but it's a proven fact that a plant can only uptake approximately 40 to 50% of the nutrients, synthetic nutrients, that are applied in any given year. What happens to the other 50 to 60%? Right there. And we wonder why we have problems in the Gulf, in the Great Lakes, any of our major watersheds. How can we not with that type of management? We end up with water quality issues like this. This is an easy fix, people, and we can fix it. In my mind, the current production model is all about killing. I tell people I used to wake up every morning deciding what I was going to kill that day. A weed, a pest, a fungus, I'm going to kill something. But I really found out I was also killing my profit and the resource. Just as important is, what has this done for human health? Yes, we're in a production model where we can produce enough food, but is it really food? The nutrient density of the food we produce has decreased anywhere from 15 to 65+% over the past 50 years. It's really, really difficult to find good data, scientific data, as to the amount of decline of the nutrient density of our products. Our farmers has just started a 3-year study where we're going to equate soil health into the nutrient density of our food. We're testing comprehensive tests of soils and comprehensive tests of the food we produce, because I want to be able to prove to people that soil health equates to human health. Here's 27 kinds of vegetables. That's the average decline of those specific minerals. And I just put up some of them. We could go through the whole entire list. Meat's the same way. Look at the decline there. You know, iron, 54%. A lot of people buy beef for the iron content, right? What's happening? I saw a research paper done last year where they tested an orange that actually had in it 0% vitamin C. 0. Why else would you eat an orange, right? You know? An individual today would have to eat twice as much meat, 3 times as much fruit, 4 times as many vegetables, to get the same amount of minerals and trace elements as compared to those foods in 1940. Now, I want to make it very clear. This test was done using, how should I say this, supermarket food, okay, raised conventionally. So I'm not saying it pertains to every producer out there. I'm just saying it's industry average. Those facts are available. What has this resulted in? The United States spends more on health care than any other country in the world. Yet look at this. We lead the world in the cases of ADD, ADHD, cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autoimmune diseases, osteoporosis, and the list goes on and on. Okay? Am I saying that farmers are to blame for all that? Absolutely not. Am I here to say that we as farmers are to blame for some of it? Absolutely. Masanabu said it best when he said, food and medicine are not two different things. They are the front and back of one body. Chemically grown vegetables may be eaten for food, but they cannot be used for medicine. And I honestly believe this. And look at what the current production model has taken us on. Our challenge then is to not only produce food that is free of chemicals, but to do it in a way which ensures it is both high in nutrient density while regenerating our resources. You know, one thing I hear so much about is we got to be sustainable, got to be sustainable. Everybody wants to be sustainable. My question is, why in the world would we want to sustain a degraded resource? That makes no sense at all. We don't have to be sustainable, people. We have to be regenerative, because only if we're regenerative do we give future generations the opportunity to be sustainable. To do this, we must change our production model. We must work with nature instead of against her. Look at this photo. I really like this photo. This was taken in Australia. That was a lake bed. That's pure sand there. Okay? On the right, that's just a close-up of that top couple feet of that soil profile. Why is it so dark up near the surface? Why is that black and not sand? Driving up here yesterday through the mountains, I saw this. There's a tree growing out of a rock. We've all seen that. Is there a pocket of soil in that rock? How does that tree get there? The answer is simple. Liquid carbon pathway. Plants take in CO2 out of the atmosphere. Through photosynthesis, they pump some of that out into what I like to call liquid carbon, or root exudates, and excrete that out through the roots. That's exuded into the soil. This is a photo of a root tip leaking those root exudates out into the soil. That's happening under every living plant. That's the liquid carbon pathway. A large part of those root exudates are consumed by biology. Biology, in turn, runs its life cycle and supply the nutrients to the plant. Part of it, though, combines with water and forms carbonic acid. That's what starts to break down the rock, making minerals and nutrients available to the plants. That's how come that tree can grow out of that rock. This is how nature functions. Ray Archuleta said it best when he said, plant and soil are one. You know, I put on over 650 miles driving out here yesterday afternoon. Do you know how many bare fields I saw? Any guesses how many fields of cover crops I saw? One. Once I left my place, I saw one field, and it was here in Montana. Okay? One field of something growing. I saw hundreds upon hundreds of fields of nothing growing. Now, true, there was some winter wheat growing, so I want to make sure you know that. But one field of a cover crop. Many, many tilled fields with nothing growing. If plant and soil are one, what are we feeding biology then? Right? How are we taking carbon out of the atmosphere and pumping it into the soil? Growing topsoil is a biological process. And make no mistake about it, we grow topsoil. As I travel around the world talking about soil health, I hear it over and over and over again, and I've already heard it here this morning. But Gabe, you don't understand. You're in North Dakota. We're in Montana. I don't care where I am. these processes are the same. They're the same everywhere. We can grow topsoil. You can grow soil in Montana. Growing plants cycle carbon. That's a fact. Let's compare 4 systems. Here's 4 producers located in close proximity to each other, same soil type. The first operation is a tilled operation, but that producer uses a great amount of diversity. He grows spring wheat, winter wheat, barley, oats, dry edible beans, peas, sunflower, flax, alfalfa. Very, very diverse crop rotation with tillage. Just so happens that 3 of these people were using sunflowers the year the scientists came and took this data. Notice the top there of that soil clod, how capped it is. That's typical in a tilled system. Notice also how the breaks in that soil break horizontally and not vertically. That's due to the tillage. How much water is going to infiltrate into that soil profile? Okay? The next operation is a no-till producer, but they primarily only grow flax and spring wheat. Flax, spring wheat, flax, spring wheat, flax, spring wheat. That's their rotation. They do have points on their seeder that allows them to inject anhydrous ammonia. Look at that soil. Now I'll back up one. That's awfully similar, isn't it? Thank you. Awfully similar. Notice you still have that horizontal breaking of the soil structure. Now I should have backed up and mentioned when the soil scientists took soil tests, they found that this soil here on the tilled system was about 1.6% organic matter. Infiltration rate was slightly over 0.6 of an inch per hour. Okay? This field, the no-till low diversity, actually had slightly better organic matter rates at about 1.7. Infiltration was only slightly better than the tilled field at 0.7. So not much difference at all. The third producer, this has been no-tilled for 20-plus years. They grow corn, malting barley, sunflowers, occasionally soybeans, and spring wheat. Look at this soil here. 20 years no-till. Look at the horizontal breaking. It's capped on the soil surface. Notice these roots here cannot penetrate. I tell the conventional farmers when I show them this, 20-plus years of no-till, and that was the poorest soil we tested. Why? High use of synthetic fertilizer. Right? That soil there, it was about 1.7% organic matter, but the infiltration rates were less than 1/2 of an inch of rainfall per hour. This is like a brick. That's just solid. How's water going to infiltrate? Those roots can't infiltrate. Water's not going to be able to infiltrate. The fourth producer, that's my own soil. I've been no-till since 1994. Very, very high crop rotation diversity, and I'll talk about it coming up. I have not used any synthetic fertilizer, pesticides, or fungicides since 2007, and we integrate livestock into all of our cropland fields. Notice the soil structure there. Notice the aggregates. There's earthworms. There is no horizontal breaking of the soil. Water's going to be able to infiltrate. When my wife and I purchased this operation in 1991, we could only infiltrate 1/2 of an inch of rainfall per hour. This afternoon in a breakout session, I'm going to show you how much we can infiltrate now. Now, the soil scientist, Dr. Rick Haney, Temple, Texas, ran these tests. This is the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and WEOC is water extractable organic carbon. Think of it this way. Soil organic matter is the house that biology lives in. Water extractable organic carbon is the food biology eats. What I find amazing about this is, look at these top 3 producers. There ain't a lick of difference between them 3, right? Now, I haven't added anything since 2007, yet look at my levels there. For years, people told me, Gabe, you can take nitrogen out of the atmosphere by planting legumes, but your system's going to crash. You're going to run out of phosphorus and potassium. Really? Now, I want to be very clear about this. It's not that I have more available. All 4 of these operations are within a mile of each other. They have the same amount I do, just that mine is available because I have the biology and the soil ecosystem functioning to the point it's making those nutrients available. Okay? I don't have more nutrients, I just have more available. Dr. Christine Jones is one of the world's foremost soil ecologists. And I had the opportunity to go over to Australia last fall and spend some time with her. And I asked Dr. Jones, I asked her, how many places are there in the world where there's production agriculture where you cannot get your system functioning without adding synthetics? She said, I don't think anywhere. In other words, she was telling me that it's simply a matter of working with nature instead of against her. I mentioned that I've accomplished that without any added fertility, microbials, foliars, any other input added to the system with the exception of seed, and we do feed a small amount of livestock mineral. Think of it this way. If we take a plant, and you can take about any plant you want, doesn't matter, on your own operation, you remove the water from it, about 97% of that plant is carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Those 4 elements make up approximately 97% of any plant. All of those elements are in the air, and they're all basically free. All we have to do is take them out of the air and put them into our system. So why, as producers, are we so fixated on signing checks for inputs? Shouldn't we be fixated on how do I get this to work in my operation? How do I take advantage of what's available to me? Okay, what about micronutrients? I so wish when I started down this path I would have had the foresight to archive some of my soils, because soil testing has really come a long way in the past 20 plus years, and it's going to continue. There's some new labs popping up that are doing some amazing things with biology, testing for biology. Now, I didn't have the foresight to do that, but a friend of mine, Colin Seiss, did, and he worked with Dr. Christine Jones. This is the percent increase in the availability of all these micronutrients in the 20-plus years he's moved down the regenerative path. He has added 0, okay? Look at these micronutrients. Every single one of them increased substantially. That's the percent available, and this is the percent of total nutrients. They're all increasing. He's sequestered over 213 tons per hectare of carbon. His soils hold over 200% more water than his neighbor, who's his brother, right across the fence. And I actually had the opportunity to dig down and look at both of these soils, less than 5 feet apart. Absolutely amazing, the difference. Calcium, increase of 277%. pH moved from 5.2 to 6.01. Point I'm trying to drive home is soil carbon is the key driver for the nutritional status of plants and therefore the mineral density in plants, animals, and people. Soil carbon is the key driver for moisture holding capacity. Soil carbon is the key driver for farm profit. I can walk on about any operation anywhere and I can tell the potential profitability of that operation by the amount of carbon it has cycling in the system. Now, on my drive over here yesterday, how much carbon did I see cycling in most systems? In 1997, I had the opportunity to hear Don Campbell speak. Don Campbell's a rancher from northern Canada who practices holistic management. And he made this statement, and I use it in all my presentations. He said, if you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. But if you want to make major changes, change the way you see things. And that's what I had to do on our operation. I had to change the way I looked at my operation. And I had to start looking at it as an entire ecosystem. I honestly believe the greatest roadblock in solving a problem is the human mind. I average between 100 and 400 emails and phone calls every day. The majority is from producers, and the majority of them are telling me, yeah, but Gabe, I can't do that. And I tell them, you're absolutely right. With that attitude, you can't. If they call and say to me, Gabe, I can do this, I say, you're absolutely right. I'm willing to spend some time and talk with you. If you don't have your mind made up that you can't make those changes, you're not going to make them. So how did our operations grow soils? Simply by following the principles of nature. It's that simple. Let's look at how nature functions. In nature, there's no mechanical disturbance. And I don't even mean just mechanical, I'm talking chemical also. Nature always has armor on the soil surface unless it's been removed. Obviously, through flooding or wind, some catastrophic event, it can remove it. But nature's always trying to cover the soil. Case in point is, why, when we have a bare field, do weeds start coming up? Nature's trying to cycle carbon and cover the soil, plain and simple. Nature cycles water very efficiently, and this afternoon I'm going to talk about how do we farm in a drier climate. How do we cycle water efficiently? Nature has living plant root networks, mycorrhizal fungi, right? That's how nature functions. Nature moves nutrients throughout the soil profile. That nutrient cycling occurs via biology. How much biology do we have in most of our soils today? It's amazing. Do a PLFA test, phospholipid fatty acid. You'll find out how much biology you have available. The other thing is, I so often hear our current production model today is the conventional model. Really? This model's been around for eons of time. This is the conventional model. What we're doing today is not conventional. So, there's 5 principles to creating a healthy soil ecosystem, and I'm going to quickly go through those today. 1 is least amount of disturbance possible. By that I mean both mechanical and chemical. I'm not saying, I understand, I'm talking to a number of organic producers. I understand you're going to do some tillage. Just realize we need to keep that to a minimum. The conventional producers, I understand you're going to use some synthetics. Let's just keep it to a minimum. If we don't, this is what we end up with. As a producer, a conventional producer in the early 90s, I had come to accept the soil I had. I thought, this is what I have to work with. And that's why I hear the comment, no matter where I go and speak, but Gabe, you don't understand, this is what my soils are. Yes, but you don't understand, we can grow soils. We can change our soils. I've seen soils go from the soil on the right to close to the soil on the left in a very, very short time. Much shorter than scientists used to think possible. Okay, nature can handle an occasional stress, but nature cannot handle acute stress. And so often today in agriculture, that's what we're doing. We're trying to impose our will on nature, and we're throwing one acute stress after another to the point where nature's just going to collapse. On my operation, I purchased this no-till drill in 1994. Our cropland fields have been 100% no-till ever since. I don't even use row markers. That's too much tillage for me. And that includes our vegetable production. Most years we have 10 to 15 acres in vegetables. This is no-till pumpkins. That was a cover crop that was terminated by winter. There's the pumpkins in that cover crop. There's in the fall. And I had a challenge. I gave a tour to a group of potato producers. Yeah, Gabe, but we can't produce potatoes no-till. Well, there my son and I set the potato sets down on the soil, start the tractor with a round bale, roll that round bale over those potatoes. There's a little later in the season. Come back in the fall, there's your potatoes. Now, I'm not going to kid you. Production is not as great in this system. But so many times I really think we're trying to outproduce our environment. We have to realize we're in an environment where things shut down for a number of months over the winter. I think one of the ills we have in production agriculture today is we're trying to outproduce our environment. We're taxing it. That's not how our environment evolved. Maybe we got to back off on our yield potential and realize, let's start thinking in terms of profit. You know, I don't go to the coffee shop or the sale barn anymore. For one thing, if I walk in, they stop talking. The other thing is they only want to talk about yield in pounds. I will take profit and resource regeneration over yield in pounds any day. Second principle is armor on the soil. And I mentioned this briefly. Nature wants to keep the soil covered. This is a photo I have actually seeded, and if you look closely, there's one of the disc openings, here's another one. That's the kind of armor I want on the soil surface. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this afternoon. Here I'm planting corn. Notice no trash whippers. I don't want to disturb that soil because if I do, it leaves it prone to wind erosion, water erosion, evaporation, and it's going to be a place for the weeds to germinate. Third principle is diversity, and I talked to you about the diversity of this particular paddock, the number of species. My father-in-law, who farmed that land for 35 years prior to me, planted springwheat, oats, barley, once in a great wild flax. That's it. All cool season grasses, springwheat, oats, barley. He wasn't diverse enough in the crop rotation. So here's some of the cash crops I grow now. Don't pay attention to the species because they may or may not work for you. All I'm trying to impose on you is I not only have cool season grasses, I've got cool season broadleaves, warm season grasses, and warm season broadleaves. Now we're in a cool season environment up here, obviously. So we're going to have more of the cool season species. But don't forget about the warm seasons. If nothing else, put them in the cover crop mixes. And now our crop rotation has evolved to the point, very, very rarely will I ever grow a monoculture. In the upper left here, that is oats with 3 types of clover growing in with it. Here's a mix of cool season broadleaf forage species. This is corn with hairy vetch growing in it. This sunflower crop has 19 different cover crop species growing underneath it. Monocultures are a detriment to soil health, and I'm going to show pictures this afternoon that prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt. You have to think in terms of diversity because that's how nature functions. We also have an orchard, but underneath the orchard we have very diverse mixes of perennials growing. And then we can graze our livestock under there. Diversity. Here's our vegetable production. The rows are monocultures. But what we have is a row of sweet corn, row of peas on one side, row of beans on the other. And then we hand harvest all these and sell them. That way we get the diversity in the field, but we have the ease, the simplicity when it comes time to harvest. And then our cover crops are very diverse, multi-species covers. What that leads to is a very healthy soil. We can change our soils, we can increase soil function by what we grow on it. Fourth principle is living root in the ground as long as possible throughout the year. This particular photo here, this was rye, hairy vetch field that I had combined in August, and now I have oats, peas, radish, and lentils growing in there as a cover crop in the fall. People say, oh, but that's an expense. No, it isn't. I'm cycling carbon. I'm improving soil structure. I'm feeding soil biology. Never, ever pass up the opportunity to cycle carbon. All farm profit revolves around carbon. Cycle it whenever you can. We have froze many, many, many times already this year. But these cool season species are still growing. They're still putting carbon in that cycle. That's why I made the comment about one field of cover crop on my way out here. What a shame. What a shame. It all begins with photosynthesis. The more photosynthesis, the more liquid carbon you're going to pump into the system. The fifth principle is animal and insect integration. I think this is really underappreciated in production agriculture today. Here's Phacelia with a native pollinator on it. When I plant my mixes and my diverse, even if it's a cash grain crop, I'm going to have a flowering species in there at all times to attract the pollinators. It's a proven fact, if you have a field located within a quarter mile of any beehive, you're going to increase pollination by about 10%. Why wouldn't I want to take advantage of that? It's free. These are just life stages of a lady beetle. Lady beetles are ferocious predators. I haven't used an insecticide since before the turn of the century, with the exception of seed treatment on corn, and I discontinued that in 2010. You know, there's no reason to. Do I have pests on my fields? Yes, but I want some. I need to feed the predators. But their pests never reach an economically damaging threshold because we have the predator population that will take care of them. Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, who many of you know, I've worked closely with him the past 7 years, told me this. For every insect species that's a pest, there's 1,700 that are beneficial. So here we are as producers worrying about killing that pest. Why don't we just worry about providing a home for the 1,700 that'd eat that pest, right? This isn't rocket science, people. It's simply how nature functions. So, how do we convert all this to dollars in our operation? Besides the cash grain crops, we raise grass-finished beef. We raise them on a mix of native rangeland, cropland we've seeded back to perennials, and cover crops. That's just a group of finishers that we're finishing on that primarily brown mid sorghum Sudan-based cover crop, but it's a very diverse species. We also have a flock of ewes. We grass finish all the lambs. These lambs are finishing in the orchard underneath the fruit trees. We have 25 sows that we farrow, and then we finish out finish the hogs out on pasture. Here they're grazing a cover crop field. We run some broilers. We're limited by law in North Dakota. We can only raise 999 broilers. Otherwise, they got to go through an approved facility, which there isn't one in North or South Dakota. So I tell people, my son's limited by the number. His mom and dad will help him butcher. But these are pastured laying hens. We have 1,100 laying hens out on pasture. And those laying hens are following the grass finishers about 3 days behind. They sanitize the land, plus we're getting to sell eggs from them. This results in a very, very healthy soil. That healthy soil then is the base of a very vibrant, healthy, functioning ecosystem. With this type of model, we can heal our watersheds. We can have clean air. And in so doing, it allows us to bring profitability back to our farms. This is my cash flow statement. These are all of our enterprises: vegetables, grain, pork, poultry, bees, broilers, layers, sheep, dogs, breeding stock, cow, calf, grass-finished beef. If we wanted, we can market wildlife through hunting. We choose not to. We work with a few charities that help take disadvantaged people hunting. And we have the orchard production. Everything under the dollar signs is how we convert that into cash. And the opportunities are endless, and I'm going to talk about them this afternoon. Last figures I heard, 14 cents of every food dollar goes for the farmer. 86% goes to marketing, trucking, processing, everything else. Call me greedy, but I want the 86 cents. No, I'll be very honest with you, I want the whole dollar. You know? I think it's ridiculous that we as producers take all the risk, but we get minimal amount of the reward. So, this is our trademark label, Nourished by Nature. That's my family's trademark label. We market our products then based off this through the direct marketing. We are now profitable every year, regardless of price, because we set our own prices. We know our cost of production. We set our prices above the cost of production. I'm not going to sell for a loss. And people say, yeah, Gabe, but not everybody can afford your products. But yet, what are people spending on human health? We sell food as health. We can do this without any government subsidies, such as EQIP, CSP, crop insurance, or any other government program. We refuse to take part in any of them because I think a business is not truly a business unless it can stand alone. Now, I am in no way saying that beginning producers should not take advantage of some of these. Please do. But I think it's ridiculous that people at my age that have been farming for a long time should still be on the government teat. This regenerative model allows us to produce many more calories of nutrient-dense food per acre compared to the current production model. The current production model is producing a monoculture. We're producing not only cash grains, but we're stacking multiple enterprises on top of it. And those products from them are going to be nutrient-dense. We can feed the world in this production model while healing our ecosystems and restoring hope for future generations. Thank you.